50. Until 1999, the union budget was presented at 5 p.m. on the last working day of February as per British-era practice. But in 1999, former Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha changed the budget presentation timing.
Welcome back. Thanks a lot for staying with us here at CNN News 18, your one-stop destination for the Union Budget 2023. All eyes on the Finance Minister. She will be presenting the last full budget before the general elections of 2024. Will it be a populist one? Will it be pragmatic? Is there enough elbow room for the Finance Minister for those big bang reforms? We'll talk about all of that with our colleagues and our guests. But let's talk about what we were talking about before we took that very short commercial break, which is what are the expectations of the common man, the middle class, the Aam Aadmi? Can I get some relief from the Finance Minister? Can I get some sort of rationalization as far as the tax slabs are concerned? Now, why is it so important? Why is that tax relief really needed? Let's break down those details and some of the expectations that the middle class has this time around from the Finance Minister. Reason one is there really has been no change in the basic exemption limit in the last 7 years. So the middle class is saying, we waited for a long time, but this time around, we've had the pandemic. We're just coming out of the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic and the kind of slowdown that we've seen. So we really need some relief. Reason two is pay cuts and layoffs have been triggered by the pandemic. In fact, we're also seeing mass layoffs still happen. And there are recessionary trends even now as we speak. So there is a lot of expectation of that common man to have more savings, more income in their hand, and some sort of rationalization. The other reason, this is a concern not just for the middle class, but for experts as well, that rising inflation still continues to be a big worry. This, of course, is due to global parameters. Even though the government is optimistic that the inflation can still be managed and, it is well within the target of the RBI, still, considering the kind of numbers that we are seeing, does that still give some space for the Finance Minister to bring in relief for the middle class? We'll really have to see. The other reason also is this would lead to increase in purchasing power, something that the economy does need at this point of time. Remember, you also saw a new tax regime that was introduced by the government, but unfortunately, there haven't been many takers as far as this new tax regime is concerned. So possibly we'll see some sort of, lucrative offers being made for more people to adopt to that tax regime as well. Our guests continue to be with us. Nalin Mehta continues to be with us. We also have Gaurav Chaudhary continues to be with us here in our Noida studios, and Gurcharan Das also continues to be with us. Gurcharan Das, I'd like to come to you as far as what can we expect for the middle class. Now, the Aam Aadmi, the common man, has been saying, we don't remember the last time we did see a rationalization of slabs. Yes, there has been an introduction as far as the new tax regime is concerned. But what about my pocket? How can I save more? Do you think this is that budget where the middle class can get some relief?
Well, the best thing to do really is the rationalization that one can do is really to have a tax where you remove all the exemptions and lower the tax rate. And this is fair. And I'm so glad they've announced this committee of the BJP, this outreach program, because these things have to be explained to voters, to citizens. And so, frankly, the best budget is the simplest budget. We don't need a CA. And so,
talking about the economic survey, what are your big expectations? What are those three things that you would like to see or hear from the Finance Minister when she presents the union budget?
Okay, so I think I'm looking at the political signaling in this budget. There's a lot of expectation on that. It's a year and a half to go before the next election. The fiscal space is not that much. I think Gurcharan Das has mentioned that before. Yeah. So I think what are the areas that the Finance Minister picks up and emphasizes? What are the areas they start focusing attention on? So I'm looking at what happens, for example, signaling on farmers, on PM Kisan, for example. So let's see what happens there. I think on the middle classes, things around tax exemptions, things around the capital gains taxes and so on. And because there hasn't been a significant move on that since 2017, 2018, those are the two things I would be looking at. And then also I think we are, while whether you look at the World Bank projections or the IMF projections or economic survey, now they're more or less in sync that India's the worst is behind us, that we are in the global outlook, India is stabilized. It is going to be likely to be pretty much the fastest growing economy. But you are entering a global recession. You are entering a time of prudence. So what about the fiscal deficit and so on? So I would be looking at the quantum of spending.
Right. Tapti, I want to bring you also in the conversation. Agree with the point that Nalin is making, that despite the fact there are enough signs that show optimism. Yes, you have the global outlook report that has been put out by the IMF that says that India will be the fastest growing economy, and similar numbers that are being estimated in the economic survey as well. But there is also a cautionary tale, which means that there is a global slowdown that is happening. There are recessionary trends. We are seeing layoffs. Keeping both these factors in mind, is there enough elbow room, enough wiggle room for the finance minister to bring forward a populist budget?
Well, I guess it doesn't have to be a populist budget as such, but individuals, especially the low income group and the middle income group, they've been extremely resilient during the COVID, and there needs to be some money back into their hands to save more, to consume more. It will ultimately, result in boosting up the economy. So it's an indirect way of doing more for the economy. So, and that can be done in several ways: widening of the tax base, lowering of the tax rates, redefining what the low income group is, what the middle income group is, and what the high income group is. All of that can be done. So, there definitely is a case for providing a little more relief to the common man.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. I agree with the point that you're making, Tapti. I also want to speak to you about the economic survey numbers that have been put out in terms of, are we really out of the COVID-19 pandemic and the shadows of the kind of numbers that we saw in the last couple of years. Now, before I do that, I just want to quickly slip into a very short break, because we'll continue the conversation with our guest right here in CNN News 18. We're coming back with lots more.
This is followed by P. Chidambaram, who presented as many as 9 union budgets in his stint as finance minister. The late Pranab Mukherjee and Yashwant Sinha have both presented 8 budgets each. And former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh presented 6 union budgets when he was the finance minister in the 1990s. And the current finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, so far has presented 4 union budgets. The budget 2023 will be her 5th. Now, over the years, some iconic budgets have been presented. The budget presented by Yashwant Rao Chavan in the Indira Gandhi government, this was in 1973. It was called the Black Budget, as the fiscal deficit that year was just 550 crores. In 1986, VP Singh presented what was called the Carrot and Stick Budget. It offered both rewards and punishment as the government took the first step towards dismantling the license Raj in the country. Manmohan Singh's landmark budget in 1991, which began the era of economic liberalization, was known as the epochal budget. It slashed customs duties on a number of items. It also took steps to promote exports, dismantling the license Raj once and for all. In 1997, P. Chidambaram presented what was known as the Dream Budget, where tax rates were lowered in order to increase collections. The excise duty structure was also simplified. Yashwant Sinha's Millennium Budget in the year 2000 laid the roadmap for the growth of India's information technology. And then in 2002, Yashwant Sinha presented what was called the Rollback Budget. It got the infamous name because several proposals in it were withdrawn or rolled back. And in 2021, Nirmala Sitharaman presented what she called a once-in-a-century budget as it looked to revive India's economy by investing in infrastructure and in healthcare. In 2019, Nirmala Sitharaman became the second woman to have presented the budget after Indira Gandhi, who presented the budget for the financial year 1970-71. That year, Nirmala Sitharaman did away with the traditional budget briefcase and instead went for a traditional Bahi Khata, with the national emblem to carry her speech as well as other documents. Sitharaman also holds the record for tomorrow.
अरे बाइक बाहर देखिए सर, बाहर दीजिए सर, सबको बाहर ले जाइए, बाहर दीजिए। सर बाहर। आज लोगों क्या बाहर आ जाइए यार, भाई लोग बाहर आ जाओ, भाई लोग बाहर आ जाओ, भाई लोग भी आ जाओ। चंद्रदेव जी सारे बाहर आ रहे हैं।
आज देशाचा अर्थसंकल्प देशाचे अर्थमंत्री माननीय सीतारामनजी मॅडम लोकसभेमध्ये सादर करणार आहेत। त्या अगोदर आम्ही अर्थमंत्री निर्मला सीतारामनजी मॅडम, माझे सहकारी पंकजी चौधरी, आमचे सेक्रेटरी माननीय राष्ट्रपतीजी यांना 9 वाजता भेटणार आहोत। नंतर 10 वाजता कॅबिनेट प्रधानमंत्री मोदीजी यांच्या नेतृत्वामध्ये होणार आहे। 10 वाजता कॅबिनेट मीटिंग मध्ये जाणार आहोत। तिथून 11 वाजता अर्थसंकल्प हा लोकसभेमध्ये आपल्या देशाच्या अर्थमंत्री निर्मला सीतारामनजी मॅडम सादर करणार आहेत। आज हमारे देश का अर्थसंकल्प फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर श्रीमती निर्मला सीतारामन जी लोकसभा में 11 बजे प्रस्तावित करेंगे। उसके पहले मैडम के नेतृत्व में हमारे सहयोगी पंकज जी चौधरी, सेक्रेटरी माननीय राष्ट्रपति जी को 9 बजे मिलने वाले हैं। उसी के बाद 10 बजे प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के अध्यक्षता में कैबिनेट की मीटिंग हो रही है, उसी में हमें बुलाया है। हम सब लोग उधर जाने वाले हैं और 11 बजे आम जनता को क्या मिलने वाला है ये 11 बजे आपको मालूम हो जाएगा। इसी के बारे में कुछ मैं वार्ता नहीं करना चाहता, इसी के बारे में कुछ वार्ता नहीं चाहता।
कोविड आपने बोला रिकवरी हो गया है, तो क्या लोग खुश होंगे इस बजट की, इतना बता दीजिए।
मैं इतना ही बताना चाहता हूँ कि जो कुछ अर्थ संकल्प है अभी 11 बजे आपको पता चलेगा। अभी मैं टिप्पणी नहीं करना चाहता हूँ, लेकिन अभी कोविड से हमारी देश की रिकवरी अच्छी हो चुकी है। कल अगर हम इकोनॉमिक सर्वे देखें तो हर एक सेक्टर में हमारी उन्नति हो रही है। अदर देश जो है अदर देश के कंपैरिजन में हमारी इकोनॉमी अच्छी है। उतना ही नहीं तो प्रधानमंत्री जी ने 2014 में जब शपथ ली थी तब भारत देश 10वें नंबर में था, लेकिन आज 5वें नंबर पे आया है। ये 8 साढ़े 8 साल में हम 10 से 5 तक जंप मारी है।
जनता को क्या मिलेगा सर?
जनता को क्या मिलेगा अभी मैं बता नहीं सकता। लोगों को क्या मिलेगा क्या नहीं इसके बारे में मैं अभी 2 घंटे के लिए आप रुकिए, 11 बजे मैं इसके बारे में चला चलता
Our guests continue to be with us. Rajiv Gaurav, former MP, Rajya Sabha Congress, Dr. Nalin Mehta, Gaurav Chaudhary. We also have Tapti Ghosh, Saket Mishra, Yamini Iyer, T.S. Ramakrishnan, and Gurcharan Das. Gurcharan Das, I'd like to understand from you. We were talking about the numbers as far as the eco survey were concerned. 6.5% as far as this fiscal is concerned. Similar numbers that we've seen from the IMF Global Outlook as well, which means many are saying that all signs of optimism are in place. Would you agree with the fact that we are out of this as far as the pandemic is concerned and the recovery is well on track?
I mean, the numbers were expected, and you can never be sure about the future. But the thing we can say right now is that yes, we are out of those kind of woods. The real issue for the budget now, 2 issues. One is going to be everybody's budget or an Auckland budget, and issue is same one, whether it's going to be growth oriented or will it be trending or move towards fiscal responsibility. Now, you both. I hope that this government has been fiscally prudently, not gone crazy with freebies. So they hope the behavior will continue that responsible manner. And as growth versus as to growth versus prudence, I would say that it will be the action on tax buoyancy.
Correct.
The buoyancy has been a good feature of the last years, and if this continues, then obviously she has room to maneuver towards growth, which is the right thing to do. The reality is that ultimately the nation needs jobs.
Yeah.
In an economy, it's been the second fastest growing economy in the world, 30 years, 4% growth, but it has not created enough jobs. We have not created an industrial revolution.
Sir, so I'll just request you to stay on with us. I apologize because the first witness coming in of the finance minister leaving her residence. As we said, all eyes will be on the finance minister and her baikata. Let me bring in Anshul in the conversation. Okay, we see lost that connection with Anshul. As I first visual, the finance minister leaving her residence, all eyes will be on her baikata. Union budget that she is presenting. As we've been pointing out, this is going to be the last whole budget that is going to be presented by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman before the elections of 2024. And that is why the are. Will we actually see those big reforms, will those big announcements could come in? Will it be a populist budget or will it be pragmatic? Because considering the fact there are enough global indicators saying there are recessionary trends. We are layoffs not globally but in as well. So that wiggle room available. Before we connect with Anshul, we're getting some more visions coming as well. We'll try to establish a connect with our colleagues to understand what's happening on the ground and if any inside scoop they're picking up. What is it for the common man and middle class, and we can really hear from the finance minister this time. we've been surveys already, the tone and tenor that this is road to recovery, signs of optimism, and that is why expectations are high as well. But this is an election year. There are 9 states that are going to go to polls. Then the elections of 2024. Will the government want to go forward with big reforms, or will they want to keep to that fiscal discipline as well? I believe Anshu is now joining us. We've just got visuals of the finance minister leaving her residence. Talk to us the itinerary of the finance minister. What are the presentation?
So yes, at exactly 8:30 a.m., Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has just left from her residence and she is on her way to the Finance Ministry, where she would be taking that Bahi Khata with her, and a very, very crucial meeting would be held inside the Finance Ministry is what we have been told. And after that meeting concludes, the Bahi Khata, there would be a photo op right outside the Finance Ministry, and from there that Bahi Khata along with the MOS Finance Secretary and other top officials of the Finance Ministry would be taking that Bahi Khata to the President's house. Another meeting would be held with the President, and after that, after meeting the President, Nirmala Sitharaman and the entire finance team would be returning to the Parliament House, where the cabinet meeting would be held and the budget would be presented. In fact, signed on that by the cabinet cabinet of the country, and after that, the budget would be presented in front of the people at approximately 11 a.m. is what we have been told. So yes, just in the next 2.5 hours is the time when that very, very important and probably the most crucial budget over the last 5 years would be presented in front of the country, and it remains to be seen what comes out in that budget. But yes, as you rightly mentioned, that all hopes and all eyes are now pointed towards the Finance Ministry and the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman as she goes on to decide the future of this country, of the fastest growing economy over the next 2.5 hours. So yes, today is a very, very important day, and that is the reason why all eyes are now set on Nirmala Sitharaman and as to what is she going to present in front of the country and what is the growth story that she is going to project for the country this time around.
Right. So as Anshul is pointing out, the day has begun. All eyes will be on the finance minister. We did get you those visuals of her leaving her residence. She will be at the North Block, and then we will have the presentation of the union budget somewhere around 11 a.m. All eyes will be on that Bahi Khata. Which way will the finance minister go? Anshul, we leave the conversation there. Keep tracking those developments. We'll come back to all our colleagues to understand the mood on the ground. Let me also continue the conversation with our guest. Gaurav, I know you wanted to come in. Please go ahead. Gaurav, I believe you wanted to make a point.
So I wanted to make a point on the demand for a populist budget. If you look at the trends of the pre-election year full budgets over the last, say, 15 years or so, the only budget that stands out, as the pre-election full budget was in 2008 when the farm loan waiver was announced. After that, all pre-election budgets, full budgets, that is 2013 and 2018, have actually not been populist, quote unquote, populist in that measure, because most of these budgets, 2013 was a budget which was widely expected to be a populist budget, but it actually towed the path of fiscal discipline. 2018 was also more or less similar. In fact, we have seen, if you analyze trend over the last 15 years or so, you will see probably rural spending in some of these pre-election budgets actually have come down a little bit or so. So they have not been last populist budget in that sense actually came out in 2008 when the farm loan waiver came, and then 2000 elections, the UPA came back to power. I would not, and going by the characteristic of this government, I don't think the government is going to make any kind of populist announcements, also because it could probably demonstrate the government's own lack of confidence about its public finance management. And I think it will toe the line with fiscal discipline, which it has been doing over the last 7-8 years.
And we're already getting those first visuals now coming in. We did get you those visuals of the finance minister leaving her residence. She, in fact, has now arrived at the North Block. Those first visuals of the finance minister, as we pointed out, there will be a photo opportunity, and then she will be presenting the union budget. So all eyes on her Bahi Khata. Those visuals of the finance minister reaching the North Block first here on CNN News 18. As we've been pointing out, this is going to be very crucial on multiple levels. This is going to be the last full budget before the general elections of 2024. There are also 9 states that are going to polls right through the year. So how much wiggle room does the finance minister really have to bring a big bang reformist budget, a populist budget, or will it be a pragmatic one? I also want to bring in Rajiv Gora in the conversation. Rajiv, look at the kind of narrative that the government is putting out in terms of the numbers which have been supported by the Eco Survey, that India is on a path of recovery. Even if you look at the growth outlook report that has been put out by the IMF, it is still saying that India will retain the tag of the fastest growing economy. Despite that, we are seeing criticism that is coming in as far as the president's address is concerned, or as far as the Eco Survey is concerned, saying that we still don't have faith as far as our recovery is concerned. Why is that? There are enough numbers suggesting that we are out of the COVID-19 shadows and there is enough optimism going forward in the next few months.
I'm happy that the economy is recovering. However, the global economy is actually slowing down. One dimension which could have helped us grow even better, especially with the extraordinarily low rupee, is exports. But our deficits, current account deficit, etc., have worsened. And with global economy slowing down, the kind of export opportunities will also diminish. And if we have further geopolitical chaos and commodity prices like crude oil going higher up, then you again will see the deficit worsening and more pressure on the rupee. That's on the external dimension. The real concern that we have is on, the government really needs to pay attention to stop looking at other countries and their growth rates. Think about what are you doing for our own people, and what kind of targets are you be able to achieve? Have you been able to increase jobs? Have you been able to reduce inflation? Now, inflation in terms of food and fuel has come down, I agree, but core inflation continues to be high. It will set inflation expectations, and inflation will hurt the vast majority of Indians, and that is really a problem. So you have a situation where there are no jobs, where you have inflation hurting the masses, rural economy slowing down.
But on both those points, there has been a counter narrative. As far as inflation is concerned, we saw this in the economic survey also, that's well within the target of the RBI or the central bank. Even as far as jobs are concerned, even in the economic survey, it's been mentioned that you look at the kind of accounts that have been opened for provident funds, etc., to show that recovery is happening. It's not easy, but India is still poised in a far better position vis-a-vis our Western counterparts. I'll request our guests and our colleagues to stay on with us. We're slipping into a very short break, but don't go anywhere. We continue to get you the rolling coverage of Union Budget 2023.
Until 1999, the Union Budget was presented at 5 p.m. on the last working day of February as per British-era practice. But in 1999, former Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha changed the budget presentation timing from 5 p.m. to 11 a.m. Then Arun Jaitley started presenting the Union Budget on the 1st of February in 2017, departing from the colonial-era tradition of the last working day of the month of February. And finally, after being presented separately for 92 years, the railway budget was merged into the Union Budget in the year 2017 and presented together. In 2021, there was another first. The COVID-19 pandemic brought on the first paperless budget. A Made in India tablet made its debut in 2021, keeping in line with the government's Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman carried the tablet inside a red-colored cover and a golden-colored national emblem that was embossed on it, and presented the budget in a digital format. Then last year, a Union Budget mobile app was also launched for hassle-free access of budget documents by MPs and the general public after the budget presentation. So who has the record of presenting the most number of budgets? Former Prime Minister Morarji Desai holds the record of presenting the most number of budget. He has presented 10 union budgets during his stint as finance minister between 1962 and 1969. This is followed by P. Chidambaram, who presented as many as 9 union budgets in his stint as finance minister. The late Pranab Mukherjee and Yashwant Sinha have both presented 8 budgets each, and former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh presented 6 union budgets when he was the finance minister in the 1990s. And the current finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, so far has presented 4 union budgets. The budget 2023 will be her 5th. Now, over the years, some iconic budgets have been presented. The budget presented by Yashwant Rao Chavan in the Indira Gandhi government, this was in 1973. It was called the Black Budget. In just a couple of hours, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will rise in Lok Sabha to present the Union Budget 2023-24. It is going to be a huge moment in the life of this government and indeed the growth story of India, because this is going to be the last full budget before the 2024 elections. You're getting those pictures from just moments ago at the North Block, where the Finance Minister, along with her team, has just reached North Block. She will, of course, in moments from now, leave the North Block, go to Rashtrapati Bhavan, where she will present a customary copy of the budget to the Rashtrapati. And, of course, she will reach Parliament, where there is a customary cabinet meeting ahead of the beginning of the session today. And in that meeting, the budget will be tabled before the cabinet. The cabinet approves the budget. And at 11 a.m. sharp, her name will be called out to present the Union Budget 2023-24. This is Nirmala Sitharaman's 5th budget. Of course, like I said, a hugely important one, both from an economic standpoint and also a political standpoint. But in the run-up to between now and 11 a.m., there will be a series of photo opportunities, not least when we get to see that Bahi Katha, which is a practice that she started a couple of years ago, doing away with the colonial era practice, if you will, of the budget briefcase and instead going for the Desi Bahi Katha. So we'll get a glimpse of this year's Bahi Katha as well on her way to the Rashtrapati Bhavan and then after that to Parliament House, where she will present the budget. The big challenge, of course, yes, the macro numbers are great. Even yesterday, the economic survey predicting that India will grow at 6.5%, the fastest for any big economy in 2023-24. But at the same time, the fiscal elbow room, that's always been the challenge for any finance minister, any union budget, more so this year, because like I said, it's an election year as well. So what will she give to the poorer classes, the voting constituencies, the middle classes, and of course, looming large in the midst of all of this is a potential global slowdown. Recessionary tendencies are very, very apparent, particularly in the Western economy. So what can we expect? Prudence versus populism, Revdis versus Naukris. Here in our studios, 2 very special guests who've been seeing budget after budget for God knows the last 20 years. We've been talking about this to Nalin Mehta, to Gaurav Chaudhary. Tapti Ghosh is also there with us. So is Saket Mishra, Yamini Iyer of Center for Policy Research, T.S. Ramakrishnan and Gurcharan Das. I'll start with the folks in the studio, and Dr. Rajiv Gowda is there as well. Nalin, the big ticket question that's asked every budget, is it going to be populist? Is the finance minister going to keep the FRBM Act in mind? Or is she going to, splurge? There is elbow room. I mean, taxes are great, buoyant, both direct and indirect. The GDP growth, like we saw the survey yesterday, as well as the IMF numbers, poised to be the fast-growing large economy. So what is the one big theme or overriding sort of meta-narrative for the finance minister in this budget?
So I think the important thing to remember, Zaka, is that sometimes we over-expect from a budget.
Yeah.
We were talking about this just when you came in. And Gaurav was making the point earlier that when you look at recent budgets over the last 10, 15 years, in exactly at this point, a year and a half before the elections, everybody expects populist budgets.
Correct.
But that's not really been the case except in a couple of instances. And that's not been very recent either.
Yeah.
So, there is a danger of overhyping the budget. I think the context is that we've gone through a very challenging economic time.
Yeah.
The IMF data, the World Bank data and now the economic survey all point in the same direction, that the worst may well be behind us. And of course, you never say never in this case. Things can always change.
Yeah.
But at the moment, it looks like that. You are entering into a global slowdown.
Yeah.
There is a possible recession, which is possible in the next few months. Now, at such a time, India is an emerging a morning star, like among the global economic framework. Now, keeping that in mind, and keeping in mind the huge capex spending the government has done on infrastructure in the last 3 or 4 years, and on social welfare spending, and again, that's debatable, but there has been a significant push on that. The fiscal space is not that high. While you were right that GST collections are higher, tax collections are higher, the fiscal space is not that high. I think what's interesting to watch out really is the political signaling. Not so much how much is being spent, because that we know the space is limited, because you also have to keep the fiscal deficit in control. It is, what does the finance minister choose to emphasize, and what the highlights on that are, because that is the signaling that's important there.
I think the constituency, which are the constituencies that she's going to speak to, whether it's farmers, whether it's, we know for the Modi Sarkar, these are critical constituencies. So we'll see what the finance minister says in a budget speech about these constituencies, whether there are specific announcements. But big picture, Gaurav. Tax collections extremely buoyant. GST collections, I think, above 1.4, 1.5 lakh crores almost every month this last entire fiscal. Direct tax collections will hit the target of 14 lakh crores, which is what you announced in last year's budget. Does that give elbow room for the finance minister to try and open up the purse strings, as it were, a little more, given that this is a big election year? There are 9 elections this year, and then you've got the big one in 2024.
Right. So Dr. Gurcharan Das and Nalin has also said that there is very limited fiscal room for the finance minister to actually go ahead and borrow more. But going by the characteristic of this government, and if you look and analyze the last 8 budgets, you will see that the government has actually been very, very focused on fiscal discipline, and it has not given in to popular demand. Even in the time of during pandemic, we have seen that there was always there was a rising demand that the government should actually go ahead and cut out checks and give money directly to the hands of people in terms of stimulus, in the manner that the US government did. The government did not do that. In fact, they used the opportunity to bring about structural reforms. Some of those may be debatable, but that's besides the point. So what the government is probably going to do is to stick to fiscal discipline. This is something that probably is a non-negotiable glide path for the government. Having said that, I expect the government to make some announcements so far as signaling is concerned. One, don't be surprised if the PM Kisan scheme goes up from about 6,000 to about rupees 8,000 a year. And also,
that was a big factor.
That was a big factor in 2019.
Before the 2019 election. So that
2019
was a big factor,
interim budget, it was presented, it was announced. And that was a big signaling, because it came during the time when the Congress party had gone ahead and promised something of a similar nature, but of a far wider scale. And I would not be surprised if the government actually goes, or finance minister actually goes ahead and makes some announcement, probably related to a panel or a committee, of returning to the old pension scheme, because that is triggering to snowball into major political. I would not be surprised. There may not be an announcement that the government is going.
Why do you say that? Because that's going to have huge political ramifications.
Yeah, so that is probably government is going to toss out, kind of outsource the decision making to an external panel,
got it,
and then wait for it. But the government is going to signal its intent that it is actually seized of the matter and wants to talk about it.
This is a very good thread. I want to ask this to Gurcharan Das as well. Others are also sort of putting their hand up. I'll just come to you folks in just one moment. But let me ask Gurcharan Das this. This has become a big, contentious economic as well as political move. We have seen some states, opposition-ruled states, Himachal Pradesh is the latest example, Rajasthan, I believe Chhattisgarh as well. And this promise is being made by the Congress, for example, in Karnataka and other states that are going to polls, going back to the old pension scheme. While politically it may be convenient for the opposition, the fact is economically it is a disastrous move. We know that pensions alone for government, central as well as state governments, pensions alone are a huge burden on the exchequer. In some cases, between 25 to 30%. So the issue is, do you expect the finance minister, given the political ramifications that we've seen, do you expect her to make any announcement here in the budget, at least to signal intent that, look, we are seized of this problem, and whether she outsources it to a committee or whether there is some sort of signaling around the pension scheme? Do you believe that would be one of the big takeaways? Will the finance minister sort of bite that bullet, if you will?
Well, as you said rightly, that would be a disaster, frankly, and would rate as one of the biggest disasters of this government if they made an announcement which suggested that they might move to the old pension scheme. So the session that they should outsource this decision, push it into the future, and pack that committee with responsible people would be the right way to go with regard to the pension scheme. And I myself think that they will not unilaterally, at this point in time, touch this hot potato. Yes, if there are questions asked of the finance minister,